May I request everybody to please join me in extending a very warm and hearty welcome to our eminent speakers for this panel, ladies and gentlemen. That was not a hearty applause at all. Yeah, that's better. Well, with this, I'd like to now hand it over to our session moderator, Mr. Thakkar, requesting you to kindly make your opening remarks and moderate this session. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity, to the entire FARA team. We'll straight away get into the discussion mode and we'll get going. I know the industry has been through a very tumultuous situation in the last 2.5, 3 years. Ever since COVID struck us, we've not been able to, or we've been grappling to reach the fiscal 19 numbers of about 21 million for the last couple of years. And even in the next couple of years, that number seems a little challenging at this point of time. There have been several reasons, if I have to say so. Of course, price increase has been one major issue. There have been change in insurance norms and suppression of income because of COVID and other activities. We would have read a lot that we are seeing a K-shaped recovery, wherein, the bottom of the pyramid or the lower half of the pyramid, which contributes largely to the commuter segment, is seeing some struggle. And because of which we are seeing a lot of issues. My conversation with a lot of dealers also gives me a sense that there is some pain that we are seeing in the two-wheeler dealership space also, especially because, retails have not picked up as anticipated. And I'm sure situations would tend to get better with fiscal 24 being a pre-election year. A lot of support on the rural side is expected, which would probably lead to some positivity, in terms of retails for two-wheelers, but we still have a long way to go. And, with the good part is now RD is split into two parts. From April 23, we'll just see the part one coming in, which means we'll not see a significant increase in terms of cost, and which is a positive. But at an overall level, I would still say that the industry is not in a very good shape at this point of time, and there are too many disruptions. So we'll get started one by one, and I'll try to pose a few questions basis, the eminent panelists that I have, from their perspective, to understand how they are seeing it and how they are seeing the recovery shaping up. So, if I may start with you, Ashutosh, we've seen that, as I mentioned, since FY19, it seems that recovery is barely visible in the two-wheeler space. I spoke about a few reasons, I'm sure you could add many to those, but these are primarily the reasons why we've seen a slowdown and, sales not picking up. Motorcycle sales have seen a little faster recovery as compared to scooters in the last 1 year or so, but the commuter segment still seems struggling, with respect to demand. And you being one of the largest players, what is your view? How are you seeing the market, and what are your insights on the same?
So thanks, Emil. First of all, a very happy New Year to all. Love coming here, interacting with everyone. So Emil, to your question, almost around 4 months back, just prior to the festive, we had a similar session where there were a lot of questions as to how the festive would be. And as usual, the two-wheeler players were under spotlight. There was a lot of thinking that the market would not respond. Single-digit growth is what people were talking about. I remember I was flooded with questions when I walked out of this session in terms of the inventory being in line with the anticipated retails. And I guess across the industry, especially in two-wheelers, the kind of recovery that we saw in festive was phenomenal. Almost a healthy double-digit growth from what we have been seeing pretty much in the quarter leading up to festive was very, very confidence-inspiring. And I remember, talking about some of those fundamental drivers. If you look at this year primarily, we saw quarter one. Yes, of course, the industry was set back by COVID primarily, I mean, second wave particularly was a disaster. I mean, people call it almost the worst disaster after partition, probably. That is how bad it was. And then, of course, coupled with the price rise, we saw the industry shrinking. But quarter one, on the back of marriage demand, we saw strong bounce back. Quarter two was subdued, but scooters did exceptionally well. That point of time, the urban demand started coming back. And then in festive, I guess both of these manifested together. So as industry players, we are extremely optimistic about what holds for the future. In fact, this year, after 3 years, we are seeing growth. Of course, there are several reasons for it, but my sense is the road to recovery has already started, and we probably will see better times as we go into next year.
Hoping for the same, sir. But if we actually look at the fundamentals, do you still feel, we will gallop towards recovery, or it'll be a slow and gradual one? Because after festive, if you see, the retails have again dropped significantly or sharply, for that matter. And at least our discussions with channel partners also suggest that there is some concern that they are seeing, because they are in a way sitting on some stock, but at the same time, they are also hoping that, the fourth quarter turns out to be good. But on the ground, momentum doesn't seem to be that good. The only positive that I would say that I am seeing at this point of time is rainfall has been reasonably decent, water table levels are good, and the sowing progress is pretty good, which means cash flows in the harvest season, maybe in March and April, would be much better. And with the global food crisis going on, and the government wanting to or willing to look at opening up of wheat exports, paddy exports, which form a major chunk of overall grains, the cash flows may improve. And hopefully, fiscal 24 should be a better year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess more so from a ground perspective, I mean, the way we see quarter four, of course, it's full of festivals, unlike last year. I mean, we'll have Ugadi, we'll have Padwa, we'll have the Navratra in this quarter. So I guess there are many positive things to look at. My sense is last quarter was absolutely absent of marriages. This quarter we have a lot of them. Yes. So we have positives. In fact, it's the balance of these positives and negatives that will manifest in the market, Hemal. And your guess is as good as mine, but we are extremely confident that we'll come back.
Fantastic. Good to hear that. Good to hear that. Sabyasachi, I may come to you. The industry for electric vehicles has been on a roller coaster ride, if I have to say so. Of course, the base is low, but we are seeing significant momentum, traction. At CRISIL itself, when we've done this analysis, we see that, say in fiscal 21, when we looked at this industry, the top 10 cities contributed to almost 50% of sales. In fiscal 22, this dropped to about 22-23%. And now in fiscal 23, even lower, which means it's a widespread thing. Two-wheeler, electric, especially high speed now, are getting accepted across the nation. Of course, there still continues to be some, I would say, notion around range anxiety, etc., which will, I'm sure, get overcome over a period of time. But with a lot of offerings like detachable batteries and, such kind of things, we are actually seeing this industry moving very positively. And for the last couple of months, if we see, we've been consistently looking at anywhere in the range of 75 or 1,000 units being sold per month. So which means they are also posing a huge challenge to the, ICE scooter industry per se, if I have to say so, because on the motorcycle side, we currently do not have any options for the buyers, but on the scooter side, we are seeing some kind of pressure. So from that perspective, how are you seeing this shape up? Are you still having backlogs in terms of, your order book being there and you're not able to fulfill because of supply? Or, is the situation getting better on the demand side also?
So good afternoon, everybody. And thank you. Happy New Year to all. And thank you for FADA for inviting us on this session. For your question, in fact, the way we look at it, as you rightly said, we are seeing a double-digit growth in the industry from this year to the next year also. We are expected to double next year. So, and your observation is also very correct that as far as our business is concerned, we see a very significant growth happening in the tier 2 and the tier 3 and the tier 4 cities in fact. And a lot of our new dealership openings which are happening more in the tier 3, tier 4 towns, and there have been quite acceptability of the EV by itself is decent. I would not say very good, but very decent. As far as the brand that I represent in, it's primarily made in such a way with the price point also being so lucrative that it is easy for a first-time buyer, and most of our customers are first-time buyers, to actually even experiment with an EV by itself and take it. EV is always the second vehicle in the house. It is never the primary vehicle of the house. Okay, it's like I have a motorcycle or I have a car. I want something for my child or something for my wife or something. So this is and they have a short distance or predominantly within the city to have traveled. So this EV becomes an option for that, and that's basically opening up. My friend said quarter 3 has been exceptionally good. Quarter 4 is going to look very good for us. As far as the supply issues are concerned, they are minor on and off. We have that basically when we did a AIS phase 1 compliance issue, which was there by 30th of November. We had a drop in the first 15 days of December, and now the production has started, so we are back on track. So we don't have any issues as of now that there is a demand and a supply is not being able to be met.
So Sabyasachi, just one question as a follow-up there. I was also speaking to Ashutosh about it, just before we got into this discussion. Is it fair to assume that EV two-wheelers on the scooter side and ICE scooters would coexist, or you would say that there will be cannibalization going forward?
Very tempting for me to answer the second part, but I think probably for the next 2 years, definitely they will be coexisting. But
So will that
yesterday when I saw the Auto Expo,
Absolutely.
if you look at every single vehicle that has been launched, has been all on the EV space. Other than the Maruti Jimny, which was launched
Jimny.
yesterday.
Yeah.
If you look at the two-wheeler space, the three-wheeler space, every single vehicle, four-wheeler space, buses, trucks, everything that has been launched is launched in the EV space. Not everything is going to happen in the next, say, couple of weeks or months down the line. This is just a starting phase, but I see a trend shifting towards that.
So the reason I asked you is because you mentioned that there are a lot of first-time buyers. So is it that an existing scooter owner, if he would want to replace, he would not look at an electric scooter? Basis your own buyers that you would have over the last year and a half or two, if you look at their profile, will you see a lot of them, already owning scooters earlier and are opting for e-scooters, as you rightly said, could be a second one, could be a second vehicle option, or even on the new side, is it that they were planning to buy an ICE scooter and now are wanting to buy an electric?
See, the way I look at it, that they were actually an ICE user who have upgraded, migrated to a EV, whatever way you can put it, as a second option because of the single biggest USP on an EV space is the economics of operation.
True.
So if, for example, the people who are sitting in this room, if the fuel prices increase by 10, 20 rupees, our lives may not be that much disturbed. But a person who is earning 30, 40, 50,000 rupees a month, his budget goes for a toss.
Got it.
And that is where he sees EV as an option that, okay, I need extra mobility in my house or in my family. I don't think I'm going to afford an additional fuel cost. And that is where I think he looks at EV as a cheaper option to come into. And that's where the attraction of the EV is happening. It's also very interesting, it's also happening more at a commercial or a semi-commercial kind of an operation. So I am running, say a milk distribution in my area. So, and in the evening I take my child out for a ride to his tuition or school or whatever it is, or my family out. So that is where I think he started using the adoption at EV at the SME segment, at the MSME segment, that has started happening now, which I've observed very strongly. And more into the bigger cities like Chennai, Delhi, that's happening.
On the commercial, yes, but do you think, sorry to put you in a spot, but post the FAME subsidy ending in fiscal 24, which as of now, I'm sure it would get enhanced, but if it does not get, or if it does not continue post fiscal 24, do you see this growth happening at the same pace, or you see a concern there?
See, it all depends on how you are actually, the numbers, how they go up to by the time we are at the moment at the option of next year FAME subsidy getting over by 24. If the numbers go up well, your economics of scale starts kicking in for the EVs. Obviously,
Absolutely.
your production costs come down, your BOM costs come down, and that's how you are be able to maintain the space. Yes, there might be a marginal increase in the price.
Sure.
I can understand that will happen.
Sure.
But I think by that time, the consumers will be more adaptive towards this entire technology.
Sure.
Okay, today, see, as an EV seller, the challenge is two ways. One, you have to convince a person to convert from a IC to an EV. So that's the challenge first.
Sure.
Second is to convert from the brand, whichever it is, A, B, C or D in the EV space. Wherein in IC today, the customer comes to an outlet very clear in his mind. He doesn't have a technology challenge. He knows an IC right from so many years and he is very confident. Then it's a choice of a brand A, brand B, brand C or brand D. I am sure even the four-wheeler category also, when you are getting into an EV, it's the same challenge that is there. One is converting them into a four-wheeler or a new four-wheeler on a EV, and then of course a choice of a brand.
Fantastic. Thanks for those responses. Moving to you, Mayank, what I would want to understand from you is, you've been if I may use that word, you guys have been a new kid on the block, with respect to disruption in the last couple of years, with online platforms coming in, and you guys have been playing your role there. So, you have a lot of platforms for generating new inquiries for existing two-wheelers as well as EVs. And you've been quite active in that space for the last 3 to 4 years at least, if I have to say so. And very recently, even on the EV side, where you are having either, arrangements or engagements with EV manufacturers, wherein you are generating leads for them and, you are helping them close a lot of deals. What is also happening in this bargain is a lot of these manufacturers are more on the B2C side, wherein there is no physical infrastructure in the form of a dealership that exists. But yes, there is also a need felt that there should be some point of sale, some point of contact in case if there is any issue, with the vehicle or with the product. And we are increasingly seeing, Phygital getting developed very, very clearly, wherein probably dealership sizes are getting a little smaller on the EV side, but there is a fair element of digital in it. How do you see this space, or how have you seen this in the last couple of years, if you want to share some views on that?
First of all, good afternoon to everyone. As the Car Dekho group, we run multiple platforms. As most of you would be aware, Bike Dekho is one of the major platforms that we run along with Power Drift, Zig Wheels. And across these multiple platforms, we aggregate close to about 75 million monthly active users. Now that's a very, very significant number, right? About 7.5 crore people are visiting one of these digital platforms or one of our apps every month. So we get a lot of data. And from that data, I'd like to share, a couple of insights that have been coming around, and something that I often go and talk to when I meet up with the OEMs, both on IC side as well as on the EV side, as well as dealer partners. And that is, today, the number of inquiries or the leads that we are generating on EVs is close to about 200,000 a month. Wow. 2 lakh inquiries every month. If I were to compare that number with the IC inquiries for two-wheelers, it's already about 25% of the IC inquiries that we generate on our platform.
Wow.
Now, if you look at what this number looked like, say, about a year back, it was in single digits. And it's already jumped up to about 25%. So very clearly, because, on digital, the customers will start to research, will start to, compare different products, will, read a lot of articles about whether I should buy an IC or an EV. If it's EV, which EV, what kind of a battery. And so very clearly what this data is showing is that the interest for EVs is certainly going up. And I think if the supply chain, if production, if the chips are all able to keep up with that demand, then EV sales will certainly go up. I'm sure most of us have seen lots of different facts and figures around the EV adoption in this country going up in two-wheelers. We bear testament based on the data that we are seeing that is clearly happening. The interest is far more than the actual retail volumes that you see today, for EVs. Now, the way I see, I think there is an interesting challenge in front of all IC dealers going forward. IC is certainly going to remain. I completely agree with Mr. Sabyasachi that both IC and EV will coexist. For how long, we don't know. But they will coexist for a certain certain length of time. And so the question for dealers who are today primarily IC dealers is, how do you adapt to this changing market scenario? And I think very clearly, as a technology company, as a digital company, what we've realized is that the way bike market works, or the way bike dealers work in this country, and the way car dealers work or car OEMs work, it's very different. Absolutely. Right? When you talk to car dealers often take the responsibility for generating leads. So the responsibility for generating leads is not just the OEM's responsibility, it's also a shared responsibility for the car dealers. Car dealers as well invest. Whether through us or through Facebook or through Google, car dealers invest to generate inquiries. But that's not been how the bike industry has developed. Ashutosh would know better than I. But, for the longest time, there was no need to generate inquiries. And I think today, if the IC market is facing this systemic challenge going forward, I completely agree with Ashutosh that, the challenges in the recent past around pandemic and around economic issues that you raised, or regulatory issues, I think those will go away. We are also seeing that the bottoming out with respect to the falling demand, right? IC used to be a 21 million, strong market. It came down to about 14 million. So clearly it came down dramatically. But that, I think, has bottomed out to some extent. But the question is that, do dealer partners, do OEMs have to continue to work in the fashion in which they worked before, or do they have to start to evolve? Our belief is that there is opportunity to, evolve in that sense. Coming to the point around phygital, I very much believe, and we've been doing lots of pilots, lots of experiments, working with a number of EV OEM partners around, what sort of models might work in future with respect to, the kind of experience that customers would want. We've been piloting, various models that I'd love to talk about maybe later on as well. And very clearly, the sort of experience that customers are going to seek will be a phygital experience. It's not going to be a purely physical experience. It won't purely be a digital experience. And it will, I think both will need to coexist to be able to serve the needs of the customer. And I think the exciting opportunity for the industry to evolve in very, very different ways. So if you ask me, would the industry for EV, say 5 years from now, resemble how the IC industry has looked 5 years back? My guess is it'll look very different.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that brings me to you, Mr. Pandey. Your thoughts, your views, you've seen that the industry has been through a tough time, the dealership segment, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. And as Ashutosh mentioned, ever since COVID hit, the situation has been a little tough for two-wheeler dealers, especially with price rise, the fuel prices going up, and at the same time incomes being in a way very controlled, other expenses going up because of inflation going up, again priorities changing, and as Sabyasachi also alluded to that, this segment will have only so much in terms of resources in its pool, and hence very limited choices. So how has the viability of dealerships got impacted during these years? Also, another point that I would like to touch upon, as a subsequent point is, we've seen that in many cities, even in a city like Bombay, where I come from, we've seen that multi-brand outlets has, worked phenomenally well for a city like Mumbai, where, viability of a dealership probably improves when you are an MBO as compared to, an authorized dealer. So I have nothing against an authorized dealership per se, but that's a concept which has worked beautifully in the two-wheeler space, not so much in the PV space, I would say. But in the two-wheeler space, we are seeing a lot of sub-dealers, which are largely MBOs, if I have to say so. So your thoughts on these 2 points would be really helpful.
Yeah, good afternoon. Sir, good afternoon. Am I audible? Yeah, good afternoon. First of all, I will start with the EV.
Sure, sir.
Because the trend seems to be heavily skewed towards electric vehicles, especially as far as the two-wheelers are concerned. So if you see the industry, it occupies now a handsome 5% share, which was non-existent a few years back.
Sure.
More so over, if we talk about ATSC, or you can say scooters, it is now around 16%, which is quite healthy.
Absolutely.
This in spite of the fact that some unorganized players are there, their sales are not taken into account.
Sure.
Apart from that, most of the companies, electric vehicle companies, have to yet ramp up their productions. Companies like Ampere or Ether, Ola, all are having a long waiting list even now. This, in spite of the fact that the charging infrastructure does not inspire too much confidence. This, in spite of the fact that most of the OEMs who make IC engines have not come in full swing into the market. So, what does this indicate? It clearly indicates that EV is the idea whose time has come. IC engine sales has dropped, as we know. Various reasons are there. Ashutosh ji was quite vocal about it, so I need not repeat it. Most of the OEMs who make IC engines, they plan to have experience EV showrooms.
Right.
So how does it augur for the existing IC engine dealers? Because as we see, by 2030, 80% of bi-wheeler sale is going to be electric vehicle. So what will happen to the IC engine dealers if they have to continue purely on IC engines? What I feel, and I would like to reiterate, is that those OEMs who make IC engine, who are shortly going to venture out into EV, should offer the existing IC engine dealer the option to sell EV under the same roof. Positively and strongly I say that. Now, from the viability point of view, cost of ownership from 2018 to 2023 of a bi-wheeler has gone up by 48% on-road price. Hero, as like Ashutosh ji would vouch, has faced the major brunt on their entry-level motorcycle sale on account of that. So, there is a strong case for OEMs of IC engine to look into the viability of the existing IC dealers. Increase their margins on sales, on spare parts, and on service. You will be surprised to note that two-wheeler service rate for the first service in 2001 used to be less than 100 rupees. It still remains to be less than 100 rupees. Is it not shocking? It is very, very shocking. See how the expenses have gone up in the last 22 years, but like OEMs are unconcerned about that. Apart from that, as far as my fraternity is concerned, they need to exercise like financial prudence and optimize their resources. They need to cut the flap around infrastructure, staff salary. They need to do activities also. Marketing is very important, but mostly out of the box, below the line activities. We should get them inquiries and results. And they should strictly look into the inventory and stocks. Here, I would request the OEMs to pay heed to it. Kindly ensure that they have only so much stock as is required. Because as you would realize, in the past 1 year, the bank interest rate have gone up very vastly. So interest cost and warehousing cost is a major cost for a bi-wheeler dealer. Sure. And not to say the least, I would appeal to the government to reduce the taxes on two-wheelers. And as far as your multi-brand outlet is concerned, I think it's going to happen sooner or later.
Sure.
And it will be a viable option. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for your views. I think, it resonates with a lot of people. You can see them. You have your entire community here. Not to put Ashutosh in a spot also, but it's a case where it's a general feedback which I feel is for the ICE community, not specific maybe to Hero. But what we are seeing is, yes, there is some challenge that we are seeing in terms of retails. I'm sure, the OEM fraternity is also aware of it. And we are now seeing the traditional OEMs also, say whether it's Hero, whether it's, Bajaj, TVS, they are also looking at EVs in a big way, and they are wanting to ramp up capacities on the electric vehicle side going forward. So I'm sure that is also going to bring some cheer to the existing dealers, because it's just the start, and Delhi abhi bahut dur hai. But I can completely resonate with your emotions. The industry has been through very tough times in the last 3 to 4 years. Some of them, yes, they are controllable. Some of them are not. Like you rightly mentioned, at least things like, even I'm surprised if you say that you're going to get 100 rupees for a service right in 2001, and if the rate remains same today, it's a concern. And others on the inventory side, even I would tend to agree to that, yes, you need to rationalize stocks on an ongoing basis. Of course, pre-festive, we've always seen in India there is a push. But post that, there has to be rationalization. And I'm sure, hoping that, the same would happen over a period of time. Moving on from here, if we look at a little long term from where we are today, in the Automobile Expo, we've also seen some display with respect to flex fuels in the two-wheeler space. And we've seen EV as another option, which is already playing out. And you very rightly mentioned, and really stark numbers, 5% of overall sales, but 16% of scooter sales, which is a very stark number. If you actually look at the way things are playing out, I really feel that over the next 3 to 4 years, we will see so many EV scooters on road that the ICE scooters would probably start feeling a lot of heat and pressure. What is also important, and what I would want to understand from each one of you here, is that when we look at EVs, we always say that the number of moving parts are going to be much lower than what you see in an ICE vehicle. Of course, there is always an argument that if you leave aside the drivetrain, everything else remains the same. Of course, it would. But, wear and tear of parts would happen over a period of time. And today for a dealership, a lot of its revenues, and not only revenues, but also margins, come from the service and spares, kind of division for that matter. Going forward, if we see a reduction in that revenue and hence margins, how do you plan to either address this, or, is there a thought behind re-looking at incentive structure for two-wheeler dealers, especially on the EV side? I don't know, maybe Ashutosh, if you want to throw some light on it, and then, Sabyasachi, how do you guys do it currently? It'll be good to know about it.
Sorry, I mean, if I got your question right, you're saying how do we incentivize beyond margins on the EV side?
One could be that, or, do you see that the margin structure for EVs is going to be quite different as compared to ICE? Because, the service and spares income is going to be fairly low.
Sure. So, honestly, I take care of the ICE business, and I felt that Ashishji's most questions were directed at me only, and I could I could see all the claps. But, I mean, I just want to go back a couple of steps and just try and clear a few things. I think, Himal, you mentioned, then Ashishji subsequently mentioned about the overall stress on commuter. I think people have been talking about customers preferring performance mode bikes, and is that the end of the commuter era? Is that the end of the entry era? I think whatever subdued sales that you've seen in the commuter category is not because of customers trading up, but actually customers going down, right? And I mean, BS6 price increases was a major contributor. I mean, almost 30%. In fact, if you look at last year, and I was just looking at data across manufacturers, price of one of our scooters went up by almost 14,000 this year, and so was two of the closest competitors. So the industry has moved, the pricing in the industry has moved significantly in the last couple of years, I would say, and that has put some stress in the overall. Of course, we know what has happened to the disposable income. So that's what, I mean, just a matter of time. We have seen it, and when it comes back, my sense is it comes back with a vengeance. And when people say that it is the end, then I would just say that just please try and look beyond the fog that you see here, and it'll get better.
I would completely support that, and I'm not denying. Even I am of a very strong believer that we need about 2 to 3 years of consistent 7.5% GDP growth for the commuter segment or the lower compact segment to bounce back. Even I would not write it off. Sorry.
Yeah. And I go back to the other question. I'm not a service professional. My colleague, I mean, from what I could understand from the business side is, I mean, free service, for example, you spoke about free service margins. I guess free service is at that 100 rupees or whatever that rate might be across the industry, is largely to pull the customer into your outlets, right? And that's where I guess I go back to your question, which is where does the future margins lie? The future margins lie in the service side of the business, but first you'll have to pull those customers in, right? And I guess if we look at the upfront costs or that we have to incur in the acquisition cost. The acquisition cost might seem like a bit high because what you're spending a lot more, but I guess the potential upsell opportunity, I mean, today in the service side of the business, there are so many different value adds that has come in that increase to the profitability tremendously. Again, I'm not the expert to talk about it, but even in the new two-wheeler side, my sense is the future of the business is going to be much more decision-making outside, and then coming and all about spending a lot of time at your outlets where you get an opportunity to upgrade the customer, to do more accessories, probably to figure out more and more advanced financing and insurance solutions. So I guess these are the possible areas in which, and I guess that's the way probably the industry would move forward.
Sure. Thanks for your input. Sabyasachi?
Before I answer that question, a point which Ashishji made was on the supply side of Ampere. I think we are absolutely online in what the dealer wants. So we are not on a shortage at all at any point of time. In fact, many of our dealers do the complaint otherwise that, you sometimes push a couple of here and a couple of there in any some particular month. In terms of service, I think, let's say EV as a space, I think the quantum of two-wheelers in the market are relatively lower. Right. So we have a 3S model with all our dealers. Okay, they all operate on the 3S, but we have a relatively lower revenue on service. And vis-a-vis an ICE, we compensate disproportionately higher on sales than on service right now to do it. ICE servicing, compared to ICE, EV servicing is relatively faster. Because it's more of a turnaround in terms of certain material. We also see that in the service industry, scooter servicing industry or two-wheeler servicing industry, there will be a lot of platonic changes that are going to come in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of different agencies getting into it. So that itself is going to be completely different. So probably dealerships and OEMs put together need to think how we are going to look at this entire segment altogether.
Sure.
Okay, so for example, you have this 2-3 operators who are running this servicing industry completely, which is Go Mechanic and similar. There are a lot of other things which are there. So again, the two-wheeler user typically has a mindset to save the last this thing and go anywhere to get his bike repaired, serviced, or whatever it is. So until unless it's a new bike and he has a 3-4 free services or whatever it is in a particular customer. So I think the servicing industry will also go through a huge change. That's my belief, both
Sure.
for EV and for ICE.
Sure.
And these changes are going to completely relook at this entire space.
But one important conclusion basis what you said is you guys would typically incentivize the dealer more than what they would do in an ICE space, because you are in a way aware that today volumes are lower in the market, so there is a need for making the dealer viable. Second, you are aware that on the service front, the revenue count may not be as high as what you would have anticipated had it been an ICE, and that was the reason why that delta exists today.
Absolutely, because
Fair point.
in an ICE industry, a dealer today logically makes about 40 to 50% of his revenues from service industry by itself. And
More than that, sir.
more than that. Yeah. So I'm being conservative on that. So
Yeah.
it's been more than that. Okay. So so it would be lesser, but I'm saying about 40 to 50% is what they make. So in a case of a in a EV, it is not like that as of now. So obviously we will have to compensate a dealer accordingly. And another very important point which is something that we are also seeing as an overall consumer, there is a cost consciousness which many consumers are now going through. This is a journey in India which we observe, especially in the younger lot, which is the people who are typically a two-wheeler or a EV or a IC buyer. So we have to be aware of what the customer of the future is also thinking when we are bringing in new products and new services to them. So that's also going to be a very interesting way when you look at customer analysis and do a little more deep dive into his behavioral trends.
Sure. Moving on to you, Mayank, also wanted to understand that, we spoke about phygital, Ashutosh also mentioned a few things, which are really important, with things like extending support to dealers in terms of finance, insurance, the payouts is something that they may get in terms of revenue. And similarly, you guys are working, with various fintechs, or if I have to say, having a lot of these fintechs on your platform to facilitate financing. How have you seen this, kind of change? And do you see that, this is going to be the way forward? Because as you also rightly mentioned, and, as we are observing, and as also Mr. Pandey mentioned that, probably it's time where, you may not have to, or you may not want to invest so much, in terms of your dealerships, in terms of the initial capital cost that you put in, and you would want to focus more on how to sell your vehicles. So from that perspective, how are you seeing the landscape change?
So, I mentioned earlier that, we've been running various experiments with some OEMs and with some dealers. Two things have stood out for us. One, I think digital lending is going to be a very, very key enabler for the adoption of the EV market. If you think about the customer experience that you typically get when you walk into a two-wheeler showroom, getting a loan can be quite intimidating for that set of customers. And I think if you are able to enable and provide them a digital lending journey, then it reduces the barrier that a lot of those customers have with respect to the ability to be able to buy and walk out of a showroom with a purchase. Now, this is something that we've been able to now create. We are, it's a little known fact. Most people know us as the Car Dekho group that does, used cars and new auto and media and content. But we have a brand called Rupee, which is now, one of the largest fintech players in the automotive space. Last month, we disbursed close to about 700 crore of loans through Rupee. On Rupee, there are, all the banks that are integrated, and we provide that platform to all our dealer partners for them to be able to, in one shot, be able to get access to, lending and be able to make sure that the customer walks out with a loan. Now, on that, we've also created a digital lending, a digital lender of our own. So we acquired an NBFC license, and that digital lender, it's a completely digitized journey, and the entire lending actually happens through a QR code. So we give dealers a QR code that they are able to have at their showrooms. The customer, everyone has a smartphone, and so when the customer just opens up the camera, scans the QR code, the entire approval of the lending case and the disbursal literally happens in minutes. And that's because all of the process happens through this AI ML tool. Now, a tool like that, I think, ends up becoming a real enabler in the two-wheeler industry, not just for EVs, but for that matter, even for IC. Sure. The second thing that we've noticed is the importance of home demo. Now, in the two-wheeler industry, a test drive was never, it was an alien concept, right? Unlike cars, where you would always need to have a test drive. In two-wheelers, nobody's ever needed to have a test drive, right? You pretty much know if you want to buy a Splendor or a Platina, or right? But in EVs, I wouldn't call it test drive. I would call it actually the demo. I think a demo is very, very important. And that's because there is this anxiety around the product. People have thousands of questions. So there is an aspect around education. And so I think it's really important for all of us to understand that, look, are we today equipped to be able to give customers who walk in the right demo experience? If we try and sell EVs the same way ICs were sold, then perhaps that's not going to be the case. I remember walking into a showroom with my driver once, and nobody in the showroom was actually coming forward and even addressing the driver. He was sort of standing in the corner, and nobody was really entertaining him. Until I had to call one of the, showroom staff and say, hey, look, there's a customer here. Can you, give him the, show him the product? And I think that's something that we've seen. We've enabled with some OEMs and with some dealer partners the ability to do home test drive or home demos. And that's actually going a long way. So what we found is that about 50% customers are opting in for a home demo. And of those customers, about 30% of them actually end up making a purchase on an EV vehicle. So this is, again, something that we are trying to create through our technology, through our digital platform, and something that we would be able to bring to both OEMs and dealer partners to be able to, help grow the EV industry and, for that matter, the two-wheeler industry going forward.
Interesting, very interesting. 2 points you kind of focused on, very sharp. One is fintech, 700 crores of disbursement, kudos. It's a huge number. Even if it is across product segments, it's still a huge number. And the second very interesting point, that till date, two-wheeler customers were never accustomed to or used to or wanting to or never saw the need for a test drive. That is what you guys recognized, and you are trying to facilitate that or enable that, looking at the opportunity that is available in the market. Yes, Sabyasachi, you want to add?
But in the EV space, we have seen it's 100% test drive first, and then he decides to buy.
Fantastic.
100% test drive.
Fantastic. Very.
You're absolutely right. It's 100% test drive. What I was saying was 50% customers are opting for a home test drive rather than walking into the showroom. The ability to provide them the convenience of being able to come to their home and bring that experience into their home, that was surprising that 50% opted for that.
So before concluding, I think we are almost running out of time. If Mr. Pandey, you would like to put in 2 or 3 points from the dealership fraternity perspective, wherein on the EV side, if you would want certain things from the OEMs, in terms of maybe certain type of business model certain structures in terms of margin structures. What is it that you would expect from the OEM, on the EV side? You've been in the ICE business for so long, basis your experience and what you're seeing in the market. What is it that you would want from an EV OEM?
I think I've already spoken about what my expectations are from OEM as far as ICE dealers are concerned and what they expect from the OEM. I think like OEM, I think specifically they should have an open dialogue with the dealers, heart-to-heart discussions, and it should not be one way. They should understand the challenges which are being faced by the ICE engine dealers. And I think one appeal which I would like to make to the OEM is to not indulge in enforcing purchase of consumables, like oil, accessories, and tires and batteries. They can have some specifications, and they should ensure that the fraternity sticks to those,
Mr. Pandey, those points are noted. I would say we should not.
And there is another thing which I would like to reiterate over here and say very strongly is that expansion should be done with the concurrence of the existing dealers.
Sure.
And I hope that everyone falls into the ambit of MDA, and I must appreciate MG Motor for having adopted that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we have some time for. Okay, fine. Thank you. I think we'll conclude the panel. Thank you everyone for patiently listening to us. Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our speakers, for your insightful deliberations on the two-wheeler segment, stating the opportunities and the challenges. May I now request Mr. Amar Jatin Seth and Mr. Bharat Shodhya to please come on stage and felicitate our panelists along with our session moderator. Let's have one more big round of applause for our panel, ladies and gentlemen.